Alright folks, good morning and welcome to another busy Tuesday here as we roll through the summer and edge closer to the new football season. And let me kick things off with a bit of good news for all of us Celtic fans who are already missing the action. We are now just over 2 weeks away from seeing our team back on the pitch. Yeah, you heard that right. In just 17 days' time, Celtic will get their preseason underway with a match against Queen's Park. Feels good to have that to look forward to, doesn't it, now while we count down the days until Celtic are back in action? There's another bit of football keeping us entertained through these quieter summer months. The FIFA Club World Cup. And yes, I know Celtic aren't involved in this edition, but let's be honest, with the Scottish Cup final now a good few weeks behind us, most of us are starting to miss that regular fix of competitive football. So how's everyone feeling about this Club World Cup then? We're about 8 games into the tournament now, and as expected with any new format or competition, there's been plenty of debate, criticism, and a fair bit of skepticism surrounding it. That tends to happen whenever FIFA launches something new, doesn't it? And let's face it, some of the concerns are absolutely valid. There's been a lot of chat about Saudi Arabia's influence over the competition, questions about the already packed football calendar, and worries about how little rest some of the top players are going to get over the summer because of it. From the perspective of the actual football on show, I don't know how much of it you've managed to catch, but personally I've quite enjoyed bits of it so far. Sure, there have been a couple of dull matches and a few goalless draws, but overall it's been decent viewing. Even that opening match between Inter Miami and Al Ahly, which ended 0-0, was surprisingly entertaining for a game without goals. It had a bit of edge to it and some good quality football, but look, I get it. The tournament definitely has its critics, and for good reason. Still, at the end of the day, it's football to watch during the summer months, and for me that's never a bad thing. And for those of you keeping an eye out for any Celtic connections to the tournament, there is a small link worth mentioning. Odin Diogo Holm's former team Lillestrøm SK played their opening match earlier in the competition. Unfortunately for them, it didn't go too well as they lost to Chelsea, and to make matters worse for Holm personally, he didn't even make it off the bench. Not the best outcome for him or the club. But here's a question I found myself wondering about the other day, and maybe you've thought about it too. Is there actually any realistic path for Celtic to qualify for this Club World Cup in the future? Now your first instinct is probably the same as mine, an immediate and flat-out no chance. Celtic are a fantastic club with a rich history, but let's be honest, we're not exactly rubbing shoulders with the elite teams that usually dominate UEFA competitions. But here's the thing, after digging into it a bit more, it turns out that Celtic reaching the Club World Cup might not be as far-fetched as it seems at first glance. Big thanks to my mate Gamber, by the way, who sparked this whole thought process. In one of the group chats I'm in, he pointed out a few things that got me thinking, so let's break it down. So here's the deal. UEFA has been allocated 12 spots for the Club World Cup, both for the current edition and the next one coming up in 2029. The qualification process is pretty straightforward on paper, but has a few interesting quirks that could actually work in Celtic's favor. First off, each winner of the UEFA Champions League over a 4-year cycle automatically qualifies for the Club World Cup. That's for teams right there, one for each year in that cycle. So for example, Paris Saint-Germain have already locked in their place for the next tournament, thanks to their recent Champions League triumph. The next 3 winners over the next 3 seasons will also get their automatic spot. That leaves 8 remaining spots for European teams, and this is where it gets interesting. Those 8 places aren't handed out based on traditional UEFA coefficients or anything like that. Instead, they're determined by a points-based ranking system that only looks at performances in the UEFA Champions League over that same 4-year period. So Europa League results, Conference League runs, totally irrelevant for this. It's all about the Champions League. The more matches you play in the Champions League, the more rounds you progress through, and the more wins you rack up, the more points you get. Simple as that. And here's another twist that plays into Celtic's hands. Each country is capped at a maximum of 2 clubs qualifying for the Club World Cup. So even if, say, England has 5 or 6 teams performing well enough to fill these top spots, only 2 of them can go. The rest of the places would then be handed to the next best clubs from other countries. Just take a look at this year's tournament, for example. Liverpool finished 8th in the UEFA ranking table based on their performances. But because 2 English teams had already qualified, Liverpool missed out. Their spot ended up going to Porto instead. Another example, Red Bull Salzburg. They finished all the way down in 18th place in the UEFA rankings. but still managed to grab a ticket to the Club World Cup. Why? Because Austria hadn't yet filled their two-team quota, and Salzburg were the high-strength Austrian club in the system. And when you look at how Salzburg managed that qualification spot, it's actually not that far off from what Celtic could potentially aim for. Over the 4-year period, Salzburg had 3 group stage appearances and 1 round of 16 finish in the Champions League. Solid, sure, but not exactly earth-shattering stuff. That's the level of consistency that could potentially get you over the line. Now putting Celtic into that picture, if we can keep up the sort of performances we showed last season, getting through the qualifiers and into the league phase of the Champions League, then suddenly that idea of us making it into the Club World Cup doesn't seem completely ridiculous. Looking ahead, if Celtic can qualify for the Champions League phase again this coming season, and then again in the next couple of seasons, and if we manage to make a bit of progress, once we're there, maybe getting into the top 24, or pushing for the knockout rounds, then we definitely start creeping up that points table. Realistically, is it still a big ask? Of course it is, but it's not impossible, especially when you factor in the 2-team per country rule. Teams from leagues like the Premier League and La Liga are naturally going to dominate the rankings, but with that country cap in place, it opens the door for clubs from smaller nations, like Celtic from Scotland, to sneak in, and who knows? There's even been chat recently about FIFA expanding the Club World Cup again, maybe to 48 teams in future editions. If that happens, well, let's just say the door opens even wider for clubs like ours. So yeah, the idea of Celtic playing in a future Club World Cup is still a long shot. But if we can build some real consistency in Europe over the next few seasons, it's a conversation that's worth keeping an eye on. Now shifting back to more immediate matters, let's talk about transfers and the latest news surrounding the squad. There's been a fresh update on Japanese defender Hayato Inamura, who we discussed briefly yesterday. Reports coming out of Japan, particularly from Spanichi, one of the country's biggest football media outlets, suggest that Celtic are closing in on a deal for the young defender from Albirex Niigata. According to multiple sources from Japan, negotiations are moving along smoothly, and the expectation is that the official contract will be signed once Inamura completes a medical here in Scotland. That's a significant step forward, and when you're getting consistent reporting, both from the Scottish side and the Japanese side, that usually suggests there's genuine momentum behind a transfer. We've seen this pattern before with past signings from Japan, haven't we? Think back to Rio Hadid, for example. Long before Celtic officially announced his signing, it was widely accepted in Japan that he was on his way to Glasgow. It feels like we might be seeing something similar here with Inamura. I even went back and watched a bit of him in action recently, thanks to the J1 League coverage we get via Optus Sport. I had a look at Albirex Niigata's most recent match, a 1-0 win against Yokohama F. Marinos. Guess who was named man of the match? That's right, Inamura. I didn't sit through the full 90 minutes, but I did skip through the highlights and focused on his touches and involvement during the game. What stood out straight away was how comfortable he looked on the ball. He's very left-footed, and from what I saw, his distribution is impressive. One moment in particular caught my eye. About 20 minutes from the end, he picked the ball up deep in his own half and sprayed a gorgeous 56-yard diagonal pass out to the right wing, setting up the only goal of the match. It was one of those passes where you immediately think, yeah, there's a player there. That kind of long-range distribution from a center back is something we've been lacking at times. Remember the League Cup final last season? Brendan Rodgers actually spoke after the game about wanting more progression from the back, highlighting how we needed center backs who could break lines and move the ball up the pitch effectively. You might remember that day. We were trailing Rangers at halftime and Rodgers took off Gustav Lagerbielke, despite no injury, bringing on Liam Scales for tactical reasons. Rodgers explained afterward that he wanted someone more progressive on the ball. And when you look at what Inamura offers, you start to see why Celtic might be targeting him. A left-footed defender with the ability to ping accurate long passes, break lines, and play out from the back with confidence. That feels like exactly the profile we've been missing. Could he be the perfect partner for Cameron Carter-Vickers at the heart of the defense? Time will tell, but if this deal goes through, I'll definitely be watching more of his games and maybe even catching up with a few contacts who cover Japanese football for some deeper insight. On the topic of center backs, there's also been an interesting development with Marek Nawrocki. Reports from Poland, specifically from an outlet called Kanal Sport, suggest that Nawrocki might be heading back to his home country on loan, with Pogoń Szczecin showing strong interest. Pogoń finished 4th in the Polish top flight last season, so they're a solid enough club. Their CEO Tan Kessler has gone on record saying that discussions are ongoing between the club and Nawrocki's representatives. Right now it looks like a loan deal is the most likely outcome. Personally, I've got mixed feelings about this one. I know it might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually rate Nawrocki. I think he might well be our second best center back behind Carter Vickers. Yes, injuries and inconsistency hampered his first season, but in the limited appearances he did make, especially towards the end of the campaign, I thought he looked composed and dependable. Remember that derby defeat at Celtic Park against Rangers near the end of the season. For me, Nawrocki was easily our best player on the day. He was solid against Aberdeen as well in the final game. That's why I was kind of hoping he'd get at least the preseason to show what he can do and stake a claim for a spot in Brendan Rodgers' plans. But the reality is pretty clear. Rodgers doesn't seem to fancy him. For whatever reason, Nawrocki just hasn't been able to convince the manager. If this loan move happens, I'll be disappointed, but not surprised. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Whispers have been swirling across the Scottish football landscape after what some are calling a bold, if not downright cheeky, comment from Aberdeen midfielder Conor Barron. In what's fast becoming the talk of terraces and group chats alike, the young Don reportedly referred to Celtic as a small club, sparking outrage from the green and white faithful and raising more than a few eyebrows across the Premiership. While no official statement has surfaced, sources close to the Pittodrie camp suggest Barron made the remark during a behind-closed-doors chat, perhaps not expecting it to slip into public ears. But as is often the case in Scottish football, such words rarely stay private for long, and now fans and pundits are left wondering, was it heat-of-the-moment banter? Or is Barron trying to stir the pot? Some see it as a tactical bit of mind games ahead of potential summer movement, or even just a bit of youthful brashness from a player not known to hold his tongue. Others reckon there might be more to it. Could Barron be angling for a reaction, or even a move away from the North East? It's not unheard of for players to ruffle feathers as a way of attracting attention. Celtic, of course, remain one of the most decorated clubs in British football, with a global fan base and a domestic dominance that has lasted over a decade. To call them a small club is, by any measure, a statement designed to sting, and perhaps that was exactly the point. Reactions online have been swift and fierce, with Hoops supporters taking to social media to fire back at Barron. Meanwhile, Aberdeen fans appear divided, some defending their homegrown star's right to speak his mind, others worried he may have just painted a target on the team's back. As of now, Barron hasn't clarified or denied the rumor, but in the ever-feisty world of Scottish football, even a whisper like this is enough to set off a storm. Whether it was a slip of the tongue or a calculated dig, one thing's for certain: when Aberdeen next face Celtic, the atmosphere will be just that little bit spicier. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.